Have a quorum. First of all, by 6:15 or 6:30, I don't think we can complete this hearing today. So we'll try our best and ask as much as we can. And we've had some discussions with the Director of Audit and the administration. We might need to have a closed meeting to deal with the issue of names, the staff names. This is to safeguard the privacy of the people mentioned. So let's try to schedule this meeting sometime later to allow witnesses to give their accounts. Any objections from the Director General? Chairman, do you mean that you are going to have a meeting behind closed doors before we are being invited? No, we will invite you to attend the meeting behind closed doors as well, together with the Director General. Chairman, I think we can concentrate on the discussions for the PAC. Undersecretary, perhaps you haven't been to a lot of PAC meetings. Perhaps you should try to come more often later. We will try to evaluate the effectiveness, for example, governance. For every dollar you spend, we are interested. So as chairman, I would not allow my colleagues to ask questions that are not relevant to cost effectiveness. So all along, this has been one of our key principles. And since we have to protect the privacy of certain officers or witnesses, it might not be appropriate to disclose the information in an open meeting. And in order to protect their interests, we have to think more often from an effectiveness or efficiency perspective. Chairman, I trust that you are going to do a good job. So perhaps you should attend our meetings often. Next, Kenneth. Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to go back to the papers. This is the third hearing, so I'd like to talk about some of my observations from a bigger viewpoint. Today we are talking about the tender document. I understand that the DOJ and GLD had looked at this paper, but during the hearing last time, Mr. Low mentioned that in terms of the final execution, the CAD should be in charge. So please don't throw the ball around. So now I'd like to ask questions of the tender document. And the administration reply in Jan 11. I'd like to ask a question about page 2 of 8 in the attachment. If you have the version with handwritten page numbers, it should be page 4 with the handwritten number page 4. Chairman, I'm referring to point number 8.2 in the tender document on the site visits and the reference sites. In the tender process, before the process was kick-started, the CAD visited Europe, and they visited cities in Spain and France. But there's something I don't understand. At stage 3, you chose 5 tenderers. Apart from the factory visits, you didn't visit any reference sites. But before the tender process was started, you spent a lot of time and efforts on something that is, you visited some sites that were completely irrelevant to the 5 tenderers, and you visited those air traffic control systems. And in your reply in Gen 11, you mentioned that the ATMS is very complicated, it's highly complex and technical in nature, and so you found the factory visits important. The reason was that you could ask a lot of questions at the factories in order to facilitate direct communication and clarification with the tenderers. I have no doubts with this justification, and the site's visits were completely justified. And for the visits of reference sites, you chose not to conduct such visits. And you came up with 5 questionnaires for the tenderers. You addressed my question. You conducted site visits to factories, so I'm not going to ask any more questions on that. But why didn't you supplement this exercise with visits to reference sites? Because you were able to communicate directly with the users and obtain their responses, it would be much better than sending out a very standard questionnaire. That's my first question. Director General. At stage 3 of the exercise, as far as the tender documents were concerned, we asked the factories to provide detailed information on how they can satisfy the technical requirements and functional requirements laid out in our tender documents. And having read those documents, we requested certain clarifications. And as mentioned under 8.2, if necessary, we can request reference sites from the tenderers, and we have the right to visit the factories and reference sites if necessary. So we visited all the factories, and we for ATMS we didn't conduct site visits, but we did send out some questionnaires. I understand the process perfectly. So why didn't you visit the reference sites? Before the tender process was started, you said you looked at a lot of systems, but at this crucial stage, why didn't you visit those reference sites? But at the beginning, you chose to visit Spain and France, but then you chose not to look at the reference sites later. That was my question. Director General, in 2007, before we obtained funding from the FC, we visited a lot of airports with large-scale air traffic management systems. So we looked at our existing AT1 system. I'm referring to more than 10 years ago. And at that time, the advancement of aviation technologies and surveillance technologies were rapid. And in 2007, we visited different countries and different airports and their respective systems. We didn't pinpoint any specific manufacturer. So we just wanted to have a rough idea of the most up-to-date technologies in 2007. Excuse me for interrupting. I'd like to ask a very brief question. In 2007, you looked at so many systems, but you didn't look at any AT systems. Is this correct? So you didn't look at any auto track or let alone AT1 or AT2 systems, right? Can you address this question first? Why didn't you look at any AT systems, or did you look at other systems? When considering which systems or airports to look at, this decision wasn't made by myself. So perhaps Mr. Wu can address this question. Did you look at different systems, including auto-track systems? Mr. Wu, at that time, were you working in the CAD, and did you check these systems? Thank you, Chairman. At that time, I visited one city, and the purpose of visiting was to look at the major air traffic control centers. That system was similar to the system Hong Kong would use. So I went there with other engineering staff, and I looked at their training, their tendering process, and various designs and management issues, etc. So in response to Mr. Leung's question, at that time we were certain that we did not only focus on certain tenderers or contractors. And the airports we visited did not use auto-track systems. Of the 5 tenderers, we didn't look at the systems of all the 5 tenderers, so both sides are equal. So there wasn't any case of bias. I didn't want to raise this point, but weren't these trips a waste of time? You didn't visit those reference sites, and you said that these visits weren't related to the 5 tenderers. They were only general visits to different countries and cities, and after that you drafted the tendering documents, and you decided not to pay visits after the shortlisting process in order to save money. I think this is rather contradictory.
I won't follow up further on this. I just want to put this on record. May I refer you to 8.1. Tender document 8.1, page 11 of 31. May I draw your attention to line 6?
One of the aforementioned reference sites must have been operated as the main system.我唔再繼續讀落去啦。咁頭先主席講嗰啲咩？
So I won't continue. So, Mr. Chairman, Canada and US were mentioned, but of course they're not using the main system. So the information provided by the tenderer was actually a red herring. Is it because of that you did not pass the questionnaire to us, that is, to the PAC? Apart from the questionnaires in the appendices, you still have other reference sites which you asked for a questionnaire survey. As I said, it's only when a jurisdiction uses the main system that it will satisfy our lowest standard. Who will answer this, DG or Mr. Wu? Mr. Wu. Mr. Wu, thank you, Chairman. Concerning 8.1 here, the purpose is to prove that the tenderers did once have the capacity. That does not mean that the proposed system will be the system. Here we mention 40 ATCs, how many years, to run for how long, and so forth. That means at the time of tendering, the tenderer concerned once had that capacity. That means if a tenderer had no such experience and track record, the tenderer would be failed. This was adopted across the board for all the 5 tenderers. That is, if any tenderer was not experienced and did not have the track record, then sorry. What about the ATMS mentioned here? That was not the system specified in the bidding document, right? But any ATMS adopted in the past. So it would be the system specified in the bidding document or other systems or any large main system used by the tenderer in the past. DG? Well, the honourable member's understanding is correct. For this ATMS, we did not specify any particular ATMS. That's only a generic term. Kenneth? Well, it's rather difficult before enforcing the contract. May I go on to D, Roman figure 4? Your system only needed to be consecutively operated for 6 months. That was the basic criterion to be satisfied.
AD, during the Chat Lab Hong Kong International Airport, a 6-month period should be sufficient. 即係呢個話呢，即係你
In other words, you mean that's your decision. That's it. So, on what basis can I judge whether or not 6 months would be sufficient? You mentioned your experience, but then I may say that my experience tells me that it should be 18 months. So, the answer is rather strange. And then for the answer in Roman figure 2.
Was also adopted in the tender documents of other major air traffic control systems. 嗱，呢個你係咪指所有嘅其他嘅
Did you mean all other international airports? In their tendering document, they also adopted the 6-month standard. If so, can you refer us to some documents? DG? Other major systems also had the same requirement of 6 months operation. That is around $1.5 billion granted by you. There are over 10 systems. And for this ATMS is only one of those. As for the remaining 7 major systems, we also asked for a 6-month operational period. Well, that's not my main question. You say here that for Hong Kong it should be 6 months. Last time I asked you about 81, whether or not 6 months was specified in the tendering document. Today, I'm asking whether or not you had read, or if you had not read, did you know the system requirement for other international airports? Was it also as short as 6 months? DG? The 6-month or 1-year requirement in the tendering document, I've answered the question actually, is small Roman figure 2. For the existing 81, in the tendering document, there's no specific recommendation for a minimum operational period. There's no such essential requirement. Having said that, if the bidder can provide materials for the past 12 months, we would very much want to obtain the materials for reference. But those materials were not essential. As for the second question, I'll defer to my colleague Mr. Hui on other ATMS. Was there a similar requirement? And if so, the duration? Mr. Hui? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Leung. Apart from the ATMS here, for other air traffic control systems, we also have a similar requirement of 6 months in the tendering document. If we refer to overseas jurisdictions in the operation of major airports like Thailand and Singapore, we also read their tendering documents. They only require an operational reference site. Even for this 6-month period, that's not specified in those jurisdictions' tendering document. So it's rather prudent to require a 6-month operational period. That is, the bidder shouldn't just have operated the system for a day, say, or 2 days. There must be a continuous operation period of 6 months. So when compared with other jurisdictions, we're more prudent and stricter. For 81 is stricter. The tenderer was to submit figures for availability of operation for 12 months. But again, this is something legal only. You actually expected the tenderer to provide you with 12 months information. If a tenderer only got 3 months information, it wouldn't dare to submit any bid. Anyway, I don't need to ask any further questions. I've got the answer. Why is it that previously for 81 you required 12 months and for this one you only required 6 months? If you find 12 months okay for 81 and it's very simple, why didn't you adopt the same for this new system? It's not necessary to require any bidder to provide a duration of operation for any system. This is not an essential piece of information, but of course if any bidder has the information, we ask that the bidder submitted the information to us. Well, some systems might have been put in place and had been very effective, but had not been operating for a long enough period of time. We didn't want to eliminate such a system. If you ask me whether 6 months is correct, just now our colleagues had touched upon this. It's a complicated system, but whether or not it is stable enough, it has something to do with software and hardware and the compatibility between the two. As for this 6 months, given our experience for 81, if there had been any problems, most of them would have emerged already. Kenneth, may I refer to the letters you sent to different reference heights? Top right-hand corner. Reference site B1. Tenderer B, questionnaire. In the letter you wrote to them, dated the 7th of May 2010, that was the cover letter, and then you got the questionnaire afterwards. Let us turn to handwritten number 33 at the bottom right-hand corner. That's actually page 1 of the answered questionnaire for tenderer B. One of the site references, the questionnaire, page 1. ATMS description covered, so we can't trace that. I have to point out, however, that the system was very new. When, the system started on the 27th of December 2009, and at the time when you wrote to them, that is the 7th of May, the system was only in operation for about 5 months already, only, short of 6 months. So why did you accept that? Mr. Wu, earlier we explained that this questionnaire targeted 8.2 and 8.4. That is, if the tenderer once had the capacity to meet 8.1, then we considered that that tenderer would have met stage 2. Should it be stage 3? Oh, yes, stage 3. I mean 8.1 is for stage 2. That is, if they had such a system, they could pass to stage 3. So the honorable member was correct. At stage 3, we looked at 8.2 and 8.4, which were not on the 6-month period, rather as on the major parts of the system. That is, whether or not the tenderer did manufacture such a system. Wow, you can do that. I've never seen anybody interpreting documents like this. Mr. Alan Leong and Mr. Paul there, like myself, are all lawyers. The chairman is half a lawyer. I really cannot make a decision here. If you gave me that sort of answer, I would just listen to it. I'll take it that you've already answered my question, but we can form our own views. As for the second questionnaire, also for tenderer B, reference site B2, 18th of June, 2008, and then you got the blank forms. On page 1, something was written on evaluation. That is handwritten page number 43. Model of ATMS covered. Software version covered. Date of ATMS put into operation 1999. And then evaluation of the system. How was that related to the tendered system? 1999, a decade ago. When I read the other tenderers' submissions or questionnaires for your assessment, they're all for 2006, 2007. And for tenderer B, they gave you 1999 for evaluation. Why did you accept that? DG, when was this system, where was the system operated? This one in 1999, is it Hong Kong? No, not a Hong Kong system. That was in Germany. What's that system? Tenderer B's reference site, a system in that system. What sort of system? Main system or subsystem? Main system. Is it auto-track system? Yes, auto-track system. Auto-track 1 or we have to be clear about auto-track 1, auto-track 3. So what's the system? Sorry, perhaps I should withdraw my answer just now. I'll defer to my colleagues for this question. Well, you don't need to hurry. You have time to answer. All right, I'll take it that you have withdrawn your answer just now. So please answer Mr. Leung's question now. Take your time. Who will answer the question, Mr. Wu or Mr. Hui? Maybe Mr. Hui. Mr. Hui, please. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, the Honourable Member. Just now, as the DG said, the system was in a reference site in Germany, in an airport in Germany. The system mentioned here was, of course, manufactured by Raytheon. One of the assessment factors was to look at the answers to the questionnaires for one of the core subsystems under the auto-track system operated in the site. Radar processing system. Was that airport similar to Hong Kong's airport in terms of flights handled, etc., etc.? Because you have to give marks to these answers. At that time, according to the users' feedback, there were 80 odd ATC posts. At the moment, in our ATC center, we got 20 odd posts. So there are 4 to 5 votes hours. According to their data, they got more ATCs than we. So this reference site could serve as a reference for us. Did they use up all the 80 odd posts or just 20 posts? That's why we asked you whether that airport had the same flight details as Hong Kong's airport. So please tell us more about the airport in this reference site. Well, I purely looked at the responses in the questionnaire. Here they say 80 odd posts, all in use, in working positions. As for the other details of that airport, I think we have to provide you with supplementary information later. Well, the subsystems, data processing systems, blah, blah, blah. How's this 1999 system related to the proposed system in the tender documents? If there's no relevance, what's the use of having such a questionnaire? Mr. Wu?
Well, if you can't answer that, let's proceed to another question. I don't have any major questions, but I want to emphasize one thing. As pointed out by Chairman just now, Raytheon and its partner Indus were responsible for AutoTrack 1 and AutoTrack 2. I think this is what we can confirm. Although the statutory name of the company may be changed, I don't want to dwell into that. But obviously, after developing AutoTrack 2, that strategic partner, Indus, left and ceased to work with Raytheon. So for AutoTrack 1 and 2, these were systems belonging to another series. Because for AutoTrack 3, it is developed solely by Raytheon company only. So my understanding or my interpretation may be wrong. I stand to be corrected. But it is my understanding that AutoTrack has nothing to do with AutoTrack 1 and 2 because Raytheon on its own has developed AutoTrack 3. Although it's based on its own experience, but I can say that it is in fact a brand new system. DG, perhaps I'll defer to Mr. Wu to take this question whether it's a brand new system or whether it has anything carried over from the previous company. Well, there are two parts to this question. AutoTrack is a brand with two major components. One is the data or radar data processing system. Some maybe more high-end surveillance data processing system, or for the lower end called radar data processing system. So there are two different names, and it's very complex. So that's one major component. The other component is flight data processing system, as we mentioned just now. In the product line, there are two types. One is the one used by AT1 in the 1990s of lower end. And for flight data processing system, for the new generation, it has 4D. That is, apart from three-dimension information of the aircraft, there is also the temporal element to see whether there is any problem with air flight proximity. So It's based on the existing data plus the 4D model. 81, on the other hand, uses a lower-end model. Meanwhile, when a user procures a new system, Raytheon can combine the two systems on, say, a commercial decision. So, responding to the member's question just now, in Germany, the SDP developed by Raytheon is used. As we understand, for the other component, it's not developed by Raytheon. We have another user survey to look at the Canada system, the system in Canada. And for the installation system, they use 4D flight data system. For this radar component, they use something else. So in short, what we're trying to say is that we consider mainly these two components and see whether they're capable of delivering for different users. As for the components, it's based on the user's request or the Raytheon's request, and we won't comment on it. In short, for these two major components, they must be able to instill confidence in us. I think one final question. I asked that question, but no one answered me just now. Regarding the financial strength and going concern of Tender B at any time, I mean, in your tender document, you only considered the price and technical assessment. On the financial viability of the whole company, say whether this company would exist in the coming 2 or 3 years, have you considered it? Because you will be engaging this company for repair and maintenance of the system, which will serve for 15 years. Have you considered the financial viability of the company and see whether that company could stand for another 15 years? DG. Now, first of all, for this company, it also developed our existing system, and it has 50 years of related experience in its own country. Well, we cannot exclude the possibility of even a 100-year-old company closing down, but since this is a reputable and well-established company, that's what we know. As for whether we had done any financial vetting, we followed the tendering procedure of the GLD. So the tendering procedure of GLD require you to check the financial status or financial soundness of the company. Tender B. Did it or not? Just tell us so that we know. Director of Logistics. Well, from the regulations perspective, our regulation clearly states that for contract for goods, there is no need to conduct any financial vetting, as Mr. Leung mentioned just now, because we classified this contract as a contract for goods, so there was no need for a financial vetting process. But can you clarify it? Because after procuring the goods, if there is still a maintenance pledge for 15 years, shouldn't there be some vetting to see if the supplier will be capable of providing the service? Because the 60% also accounts for maintenance in your assessment. Now, our principle in classifying whether it's a contract for goods or services is this. There may be recurring costs for maintenance very often, but it depends on the weight. Here, the weight is very different. the maintenance costs. I mean, the contract sum is more than 10 times the recurring maintenance costs. So on this basis, we considered it a contract for goods, and as a result, according to the regulations, there was no need for any financial vetting. Kenneth, so they say it wasn't necessary. All right, I understand how you classify the contract, but if you look at the capital costs and the annual maintenance charges in total, as you said, some may be a few times, some may be as much as 10 times. So how did you classify whether it should be a contract for goods or services? Because for some items it may be just several times over. I am talking about the meaning of contract for goods or services. You meant that for contract for services you are going to you would conduct a financial vetting, right? But not in the case of goods. Here, the initial outlay and the total annual maintenance costs were 10 times apart. So because the initial outlay sum was very great. I think this is too rigid an interpretation according to your regulation, because for the annual maintenance charge, for one of the tenderers, it was close to $200 million. I don't want to bring up other issues. Say for the smart ID, you may say that a replacement is necessary because you're not able to maintain the system, and it's a waste of taxpayers' money. The whole system should be replaced because of the supplier's inability to maintain it. Well, perhaps you can put it in the record. The Director of Logistics already provided an answer. I have no other questions, Chairman. All right, next, Mr. Eleanor. I'll let you ask first. You let me go first. I was the first one in the first round. It's okay, we still have much time left. Well, Alan, why don't you let Raymond Wong ask first? Well, in this audit report, when it comes to the new ATMS, what we care about is the value for money perspective. $1 billion going to waste, at least partially. And public wisdom of the public is very simple. Well, you spend so much money in procuring a system. In the end, the system doesn't work. And we have chief engineers, we have system directors and directors here. All of you are professionals. Well, it's just a waste of breath and time in pursuing questions on technicalities. Well, I asked a simple question and you failed to answer. You know that the you knew 83 did not comply with the specifications in the tender document, and yet you procured it. And for example, in February 2010, there wasn't any hardware for the operation of 83 for the proven performance record. Well, that's the term in English. Well, for this proven performance record, the translation is really strange. Anyway, there was never any proven performance record in accordance with the tender document 6.1, and yet finally you awarded the contract to the company. And then in 2010, when the tender was assessed, there were media reports that the 83 during its testing stage in Delhi and the other airport, there were serious technical faults. Then some air traffic controllers refused to use the system, and yet you insisted in procuring the system. Then you told us that it was an award-winning company, and what's the relevance of that with the 83 system full of errors? So you just rely on this pretext because you really can't argue it. And you should provide something about the assessment of the 83 system used in Delhi airport or some official papers to show us that even the Indian government or the authority considered 83 sound and stable, since you said it's an award-winning system. Give us some papers. You spent $70 million in paying visits around the world to look at different airports. So what's the point of spending $70 million? So you knew that it did not comply with the tender specifications and you insisted in procuring the system. Explain to us. I'm just relying on my common sense. I'm not a professional. I'm not the expert. You're just squandering money away. Then my next question is why gave them 80 million? That's a very simple question. Just let him answer first. DG, Chairman, members, thank you for your question. We did not insist in procuring a certain system. For every system, we conducted a comprehensive assessment according to the established practices of the government, and the GLD and the DOJ also checked all the tender assessment and scores were given. On the price component, scores were given, and before that we had no idea the price bid offered by each tenderer. As for whether we communicated with the Indian counterpart on the use of the system, in fact we did in Jan 13 in the appendix. We had copies of email, but that's around June 2013. You're referring to that document, right? That's a reply to your email, is that right? In February 2012, you signed the contract. Right, but now we're asking about the time when the contract had not yet been awarded. And did you ask India? My question was this. In 2012, in assessing the tender, so don't rely on any papers in 2013. If you have any paper before 2012, do tell us. In 2013, 83 was undergoing a site acceptance test, and we understand that they were happy with the site acceptance test. That was what we know. As well, clause 8 of the tender document, we do not just look at a particular system. We also look at the track record of each and every supplier and see whether the supplier is able to develop a new system and a known system. And through the after going through strict procedures, we awarded the contract to tenderer B for the development of 83. Let me ask another question. The CAD relied on various excuses. They used lies to cover up their mistakes and deceive the audit commission. Now, please don't judge, just ask questions. But I have a question in the following. I'm just passing a judgment based on objective facts. It's subjective. They can decide not to accept it. $89 million is... Now, they are mathematicians, they are accountants, they don't know everything. They're just like ourselves, we don't know everything, but maybe I'm beating about the bush. Well, you're just using different excuses and using lies to cover up the payment of $89 million given to Raytheon Company. This is my subjective opinion. You can decide not to accept it. In this council, I am protected under the Electoral Powers and Privileges Ordinance. I can even resort to slander or libel. On other occasions, you can sue me for libel, but not here. For CV1, the sum involved was $42.4 million. We don't know everything, but we felt that it's really strange if the contractor couldn't deliver, and yet they did not need to compensate. This is what the public know. Well, there was a problem here, and instead of requiring the contractor to pay damages, you even gave them $89 million. In para 2.6 and 2.7a of the audit report, you talk about the new system being very powerful, which could deal with a lot of air traffic controllers and radar information and flight information, 5 times more than the existing capacity of the existing system, and could also cope with the third runway system. So it's really questionable why you need contract variation. And there is also an ultimate fallback system specified in your contract, in your tender document. And why do you need a contract variation if it's already included in the tender document? It's a procurement requirement. Of course, the system could not be perfected in one go. Everyone knows that. But why wasn't there any clause included in your tender document for future enhancement of the system or upgrading of the system? Wouldn't you need room for further improvement? Or were you just colluding with them? When you prepare the contract, shouldn't you reserve room to allow for clauses for future enhancement? And you struck a deal with them in such a manner, so much money involved, $1 billion. Please explain to me. Also, I'll just answer that first.
Director General, on the contract amendments, maybe I will delegate to Mr. Lee. Chairman, thank you very much for the question by Mr. Wang. There are several reasons in which we need to amend the contracts. Sometimes we face circumstances which could not be predicted before the tendering process. Sometimes we have to comply with new regulations of ICAO. And between the start of the tendering and the first time we amend the contracts, we are talking about almost 3 years. And within these 3 years, there were a lot of changes operation-wise. So as such, these changes must be incorporated into the new contracts, or else when the new system is in operation, certain functions would be lost. So these are the two major reasons. Chairman, as I mentioned, no system can be perfect at the first time. But when you first met the contractors and when you first drafted the contracts, you didn't predict these. You did not allow room for such optimizations. As such, we are talking about public money. You are not a private organization. If the CEO of a company wastes so much money, he or she would be fired, but you wouldn't be. So you have to be financially prudent. That was my question. Mr. Lee, and you said you have to pay extra. That's ridiculous. So, Mr. Lee, can you address the question of the tendering period? Don't forget that from 2009 to 2012, the contract was signed in 2012. At that time, you should be well aware of the new regulations or requirements by ICAO. And in May 2011, you paid another 42 million. Can you explain this to Mr. Wong? You cannot explain the 3-year gap. At that time, at the beginning, you could add a lot of things or amend the contracts as you wish according to the situation. But you have signed all the tendering documents, and later on you said you had to pay extra. That doesn't make sense. Why weren't you aware of such changes between 2010 and 2012? Were you only aware of these changes after 2012? As Yokman said, did you put yourself in a very disadvantageous situation when you granted these contracts? The first time we amended these contracts, it was in September 2011. The International Civil Aviation Organization drew up details of the Asia Pacific flight plan, and the contract was granted earlier in 2011, and at that time we didn't know the details of the new regulations by ICAO. If the purpose of optimizing the fallback system was to cope with the changes of ICAO, so when do we need this ultimate fallback system? That's when both the main and backup systems fail. We need the ultimate fallback system. But if this happens in Hong Kong, if both the main and backup systems in Hong Kong fail, then I think the aviation trade in Hong Kong would be in a mess. So it's unreasonable if you say you have to deal with the regulations of ICAO. Under A, why didn't you have such system in 2009, and why did you require it later? Is this system really necessary? Thank you, Chairman. The entire air traffic control system has a 3-tier design, and we have the main system, a backup system, and the ultimate fallback system. The main and backup systems both operate on the same software. And according to past experience, it's very rare that both the main and backup systems fail at the same time, but the possibility is not zero. A few weeks ago in London, in Heathrow Airport, the system had some failure because both the main and backup systems failed, and as such, it created some confusion in the air traffic. The ultimate fallback system we are adopting now make use of different sets of softwares from different developers. So if both the main and backup systems fail due to software problems, the ultimate fallback system should not face the same issue. And that said, the systems have their limitations, and of course we hope we would never have to use the ultimate fallback system. We hope our controllers can manage the flights, not only flights to Hong Kong International Airports, but also other flights. If we don't have such a system in place, in case of issues, aircrafts passing by might be affected, and as such, the entire traffic operations in Asia Pacific might be compromised. And that's why the ICAO requires every region to set up to be equipped with such systems. And even if what you said were right, we shouldn't have to bear the costs. All the new functions of the system were provided by Raytheon, and you may say this is only copy and paste. They only had to make very minor tweaks, if at all. So that's what I understand. And there's no reason we have to pay tens of millions of dollars for such system. After all, we have to gauge the cost effectiveness of everything we do. Why do you have to pay 40 million plus to this company? Mr. Lee, how much does this system cost? If both the first and second systems fail, should you introduce another set of backup system instead of this system so that you wouldn't be limited by the contracts? Or do you have to let Raytheon take care of this system? Did you make any calculations whether you are being exploited or held to ransom? Can other companies provide this ultimate fallback system? So that's really the question by Raymond Wong. You have to protect the use of public money. When you spend tens of millions of dollars, you cannot just look at technical considerations of the system. You have to consider the cost effectiveness of this sum of money. Can you really find ways to avoid paying for this sum of money? So that's exactly the question raised by the Audit Commission. Can you tell us how much this system costs in the overall in the overall 40 plus million budget? Let's look at page 137. If we address it already, that's fine. And for this 40 plus million, the expanded simulator system and the number of input operated positions was increased from 32 to 48, and the original estimation was that it would be cut by 50%. Can you explain the discrepancy? And in the original ATMS contract, and the CAD purchased a number of systems, including main systems and backup systems, but in reality, we only need less than 60 operators. Why don't we change these positions to training positions? And why did we need these extra positions? Director General, did you make such considerations? Yes, we did. And the reason for expanding the simulator system was that the original 32 input operator positions, we had two groups. 16 positions. We had two groups with 16 positions each, and we had 6 positions who actually who were operating these simulator systems, and the rest are what we call pseudo pilots, and they were responsible for monitoring the radars and controlling the aircrafts. And in the training process, we have some positions who are trainers. So we have two groups of 16 each. By expanding the number of positions to 48, we will have 3 groups. And the reason for the expansion was that the simulator system wasn't only for training. The system also served to evaluate new flight procedures. So we need a lot of simulators for this exercise. And after the evaluation, we can better deploy our manpower, and we can train our flight controllers. And as such, we felt the need to introduce another set of system, and we have to expand the number of positions from 32 to 48. Assuming what you said was right, according to 3.4 of the tendering document, these new the money can only pay for the new hardware, and the the maximum cost should not exceed 400,000, and all three things together would add up to more than 40 million. So the original budget was just a few 100,000. So why do we have to spend so much? So I don't think you'll be able to answer this question. And the next, we are talking about $46.8 million, and the CAD identified certain problems, and this was mentioned in 2.9 and 2.10a of the audit report. And in June 2013, the CAD submitted a request to the GLD, and at that time, and tests were completed in the U.S. For the 83 system, and the systems even haven't even arrived in Hong Kong. How could you identify problems before the systems even arrived in Hong Kong? So, I have my doubts. So, can you address my concern? So, there's something wrong with the timing. For the second amendment, perhaps Mr. Lee can address the question. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for the question by Mr. Wong. The factory test was conducted in July 2012. It wasn't completed by July 2012. And since they didn't receive any objections from us, the suppliers shipped the systems to Hong Kong so that we could begin training work. And under such arrangements, we could expedite the training process for the new system. That you weren't answering my question. And in June 2013, the amended contract was submitted to CAD, but at that time the system had not even arrived in Hong Kong. And how could you conduct the training and identify operational issues? There was something wrong with the timing. The systems had not even arrived in Hong Kong. Mr. Lee, let me just clarify myself. Can you talk about the amendment of the contracts? The second contract amendment took place, the amendment was done because of two reasons. First, it was because of the new regulations by ICAO. And in November 2012, the ICAO approved a worldwide aviation plan, and certain ideas must be implemented into the new system. That's the first reason. And the second reason was Mr. Wong mentioned that the systems have just passed the factory test and they haven't even arrived in Hong Kong. So how did we know that improvements had to be made? As I mentioned, even though the factory tests weren't completed, we had no objection for the suppliers to ship the systems to Hong Kong as soon as possible. And for the simulator systems, we saw that there were issues. Can you make it clear? You were talking about the simulators, not the whole system, right? Yes. Were you talking about the simulator? During the second contract amendment in Part A, can you clarify? Can you clarify the 27.7 million you spent? Is that what you want to clarify, Mr. Wang? The question was very clear. He mentioned the timeline. Can you answer it now, or you can answer it, give an answer later if necessary? Well, his answer was very fragmented. He did not object to the simulators, not the system itself. So they needed the system for training, right? Mr. Lee, take your time. The entire system arrived. When did it arrive? in July or August 2012. In response to ICAO's worldwide aviation plan, it was only passed in November 2012. That was the 19 million parts. Can you address the Part A first? For Part A, according to the contract, the system should undergo factory tests before it's shipped. But in order to speed up the entire process, the progress of the project, we did not object to having the system shipped to Hong Kong before the factory tests were completed. So as such, our controlling officers were able to test the system and accumulate some kind of experience. And at that stage, we identified certain issues. The factory tests haven't even been completed, and did you hint that you would pay them extra money for amendments or refinements? Was there a violation of the contract because you were not able to fulfill the contract, and you were just compromising your own interests? You said you allowed them to ship the system to Hong Kong, but after that, if you identify problems, you had to pay extra. The fact is, they found a lot of issues. This it doesn't make sense. If you have to fix the system, you should fix it before it arrived in Hong Kong. And now this is completely nonsense. According to the contract, when did they have to hand over the system? They had to complete the factory test, right? If you allow them to ship the system before the factory tests were completed, you were putting yourself in jeopardy. So in simple words, you were wasting our money.
Please answer. This is rather complicated. So, slowly. According to the original contract, they should complete all the factory acceptance tests before delivering the system to Hong Kong for assembly. Yes, precisely that's what you tell us in the documents. So why is it that you did something beyond the contract? Because the contract did ask for a factory acceptance test. We did not object to delivery first. Well, he mentioned thrice already that they did not object to early delivery. But then there was this undertaking that after delivery, the consequence and cost of the system failing the acceptance test while in Hong Kong would be borne by them. The system would be delivered back to them. Now, first of all, you had to wait till the factory test was successful. But before you knew whether or not the factory test was successful, you asked for delivery in order to enhance efficiency. They would chase after the supplier for liability afterwards. Well, that's the ideal situation, but you did not do that. Did you consult the DOJ from the contractual viewpoint? Well, Mr. Chairman, they did not look at that because they gave way already. They accommodated the other party. They gave no objection. Well, did you ask the DOJ to look at this from the contractual point of view, in that you might not be sufficiently protecting yourselves? Did you consult the DOJ? When I looked at the documents, I saw that the task force did talk to the GLD. So between the GLD and the CAD, All right, GLD, did you agree? Mr. Chairman, I don't have the information here. I really cannot answer that question. I understand. Maybe you go back and check. The CAD proposed that training should start in August 2012. The 83 system was undergoing factory acceptance test in the United States of America, and 308 errors were discovered. You did not wait till Raytheon handled all the deficiencies before delivery to Hong Kong for training. So you actually put yourself into a very disadvantageous position, but you were willing to allow that, and you did not object to that. Well, you did not object, but we object. The audit objected because we're talking about taxpayers' money. Well, you're totally acting beyond common sense. Well, I don't know the feeling of the Undersecretary, Mr. Yao. I think he was confused. He was not exercising due diligence and supervision. Last time, Professor Anthony Cheung was scolded by me. You wanted to conduct training. Well, maybe you should have sent a whole team of staff members to the U.S. To be trained to use this problematic system. Between 2008, 2012, and from 2013 to 2016, in paragraph 2.9, you would like to have evaluation and training sessions. And then application started in 2008 and 2013. The CAD proposed to improve the system in June 2013. Well, then the other party's navigation system started much earlier. So would you please give me an answer? DG, well, perhaps I should separate that question into two questions. Number one, there were points to note. There were still deficiencies during the factory acceptance test, but we would like to start training. It's because we would like to catch up with time. The supplier had to bear the consequences, because if the system was not okay, the system would be delivered back to them. Number two, why is it that we should be trained to use an imperfect system? In fact, for a new system, there are different steps and modules for training. At that time, we were talking about very basic training modules. In that process, we had to know that there was this new system, what buttons there were, what new functions could be provided by the system, and so forth. It's not for training our staff to navigate aircraft by using the system. So we'd like to grasp our time well. We would like to make use of the time available. As regards the ICAO's Global Air Navigation Plan endorsed in 2012, that actually explained why the contract variation was in June 2013. It was not required that specific tasks should be done during a specified time frame. They just spelled out the tasks. It's just like what Mr. Wong said. Up to 2013 is a stage, and then 2013 to 2018 is the second 5-year period, and then the third, the fourth 5-year periods. In any case, at the end of the day, gradual improvement would be made by all jurisdictions. under this global air navigation plan at different stages for different areas, like the nature and aircraft and properties of aircraft. Well, even CV1 did not cover everything in the new system. So in December 2012, when the ICO published the Global Air Navigation Plan, we in June 2013 asked for a contract variation. Mr. Wong? Well, final question on B. The enhancements were related to meeting the new requirements of ICAO vis-à-vis the GANP, which was endorsed in November 2012, and PBN. But the ICAO only asked the jurisdictions to complete the GANP requirements in 2014. There was no requirement for all jurisdictions to immediately upgrade their ATMS because upgrading had not been completed yet. But you would like to be the pioneer of the world. You would like to be even more advanced than the US. Why did you spend $90 million on this? For technical issues and comparisons with our neighboring jurisdictions, I'd like to defer to Mr. Lee. Mr. Lee? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wong, for your question. Perhaps I should supplement by offering some background information. Hong Kong is a regional aviation hub. We're duty-bound, and it is necessary to, in accordance with the ICAO's proposals and actual requirements, to adopt certain requirements in a timely manner. For the GANP, its implementation is a very good example. Another example is this Regional Performance-Based Navigation Implementation Plan, the PBN. For such aviation improvement, the CAD is duty-bound to handle and implement the requirements. As the DG and the other Mr. Lee said, for the second contract variation, it was actually to address these ever-changing requirements from the ICAO. As a regional aviation hub, we're duty-bound to do so. So, there is a difference between duties and requirements. You're talking about $19 million, quite a huge sum of money. Will you refer to another Mr. Lee? Mr. Simon Lee, is he your brother? Apparently, they're contradicting themselves. You're only required to complete the Regional Performance-Based Navigation Implementation Plan in 2014 to satisfy the Global Air Navigation Plan. But you're not asked to immediately upgrade your aviation systems immediately under the GANP. You would like to be even more advanced than the US. You would like to lead the whole world. So even though you're the Asia-Pacific aviation hub, you should not have spent this extra $19-odd million. DG, any supplement? For the time being, nothing special to add. Well, according to paragraph 2.23 of the audit report, there were 308 deficiencies in the incomplete factory acceptance test and 127 outstanding deficiencies or observations by the site acceptance test stage. You have to consider a whole series of tests. The actual completion date was actually unknown at that time. Did the CAD set a ceiling, a cap? If the system could not be used, would the CAD consider asking the Raytheon for compensation? And right from the beginning, when you wasted public money, these few CAD officers who are present here today, should they be held liable? DG, for 81, during the test and delivery stages, there are hundreds of aspects to address. But after strict tests, we accepted the system, and in the past 10 odd years, the system had been functioning well. Be it Tenderer B or colleagues of relevant projects, they spared no effort in handling this new ATMS. According to our latest estimation, roughly by the first half of 2016, we would be able to commission the new system and to use it to provide efficient and safe services. So your target date is 2016. Our estimation is the first half of 2016. First half of 2016. Originally, it should be the 18th of July 2012. Am I correct? If we calculate the final date in the contract, it should be the end of 2013. Well, you're talking about a slippage of 3 years. Still. And now you're talking about June 2013. By how many years are you lagging behind? Well, the system was delivered at the end of 2013. According to the contract, after receiving the system in 2013, in accordance with the contract, we still had to allow a period of time for training ATCs. In our paper to the Finance Committee of the LegCo, that would take around 9 to 10 months. So, you should have commissioned the system at the end of 2014. Our earlier estimation was that we would be able to use the new system at the end of 2014. Now you're talking about 2016. If we're to commission the system and the control center in 2016, the first half of 2016, well, the estimated date would be the first half of 2016. How much time for training? 9 months for the time being. So that's to be added on to 2016. Then apart from this $80 million, are there any other extra funding needed? We're very cautious in looking at money issues. The LegCo has granted us $1.5 billion. We don't think we need another contract variation. Well, this is rather laughable. You try to inflate the figures, and then if you underspend, you will pass the value for money test. Don't give me that money. Well, this system may just cost $1 billion. I'm not calculating that for you. Well, you can't answer our questions like that. You asked the LegCo for $1.5 billion, but in actual fact, it only cost $1 billion. Well, it's just like your new complex last time. You asked for $1.5 billion and then came to tell us that you did not overspend. This concept is very wrong. When we give you $1.5 billion, if you spend only $1 billion, that doesn't mean that you can use the remaining $500 million. You're now behind schedule. You should give us another set of figures. There's no reason for the system to become cheaper. Where comes the money? Don't tell me that the LegCo granted me $1.5 billion. Now I'm 4 to 5 years behind schedule. and I should still be given $1.5 billion. You should try to understand how much the system is to cost, to what extent this system is delayed. Well, did you explain all these to any panel or committee of the electrical? It should be the Economic Development Panel, isn't it? I think you should explain to the Economic Development Panel as soon as possible. DG, you have something to say? Oh, Under Secretary, you have something to say? Just a few words. Please speak louder. After we learned that there was slippage in our paper submitted to you in 2013, in fact, at different stages, we had papers for the Economic Development Panel, which had made this a standing item for members to discuss, and we're willing to go there to explain. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 papers. But you did not tell them that the system would only be commissioned in 2016 or even 2018. Well, just now I asked them for a timetable and whether or not there would be a cap. And that's when they answered my question. All along, we've told the electrical the estimated completion time, that is the commissioning time. Your last paper was submitted to us in January 2014. January 2014. Now is already January 2015. So, the issue is clear. Not even the Undersecretary knows everything. They last explained to us in January 2014, and at that time you told the electrical that commissioning would take place in January 2015. All the papers mentioned by you are here. Now it's to be 2016. That's why I suggest you explain to the panel. All right? No more questions, Chairman. All right, so much for today. Colleagues, our discussion can't be finished at this meeting. So next time we'll have a special report.
So next time we'll wait for them to give us some information, and then we'll read through them and follow up on them. Thank you. Thank you, Director. Thank you, everyone.